There is a unique kind of quiet that only comes with a heavy winter snowfall. It is a silence that feels almost heavy, as if the snow itself is pressing down on the world, swallowing up every little sound. For some people, that kind of isolation is peaceful. For others, it is a warning. Last winter, a man decided he needed to get away from the stress of his daily life. He took a few days off work, packed his truck with cold weather gear, and loaded his dog, an energetic retriever mix named Roscoe, into the passenger seat. His plan was simple. He wanted to drive deep into the state forest, find a remote spot, and spend a few days camping alone in the freezing cold. He wanted to be completely off the grid, far away from other people, where he could just clear his head. He had been planning this trip for weeks, checking his gear over and over. He drove for hours, eventually turning off the highway onto a narrow, unmaintained logging trail. The road was rough, covered in thick sheets of packed snow and ice. His truck slid a few times, but he kept going, pushing deeper into the dense woods. After driving for almost an hour, he parked at a small pull-off that looked like it had not been used in a long time. From there, he hiked another 20 minutes with his heavy backpack and Roscoe until they reached a small clearing surrounded by thick trees. The snow was deep and untouched. There were no footprints or signs of anyone else being around recently. That was exactly what he wanted. He set his pack down, cleared a spot for a tent, and let Roscoe wander around while he worked. He stayed close, sniffing the snow in the trees and playing. He pitched the tent, staking it down hard because the ground was frozen, and laid out his sleeping pad and winter-rated sleeping bag inside. He knew it was going to be a cold night, well below freezing, so he layered properly. Thermal base layers, thick wool socks, a warm fleece, and a heavy jacket stayed on even after camp was set. Once the tent was ready, he gathered dead wood and built a small fire pit. He started a fire and let it burn down until he had a steady flame. He cooked dinner over it, just a simple meal, and sat on a log eating while Roscoe lay near the fire. The woods were quiet in that deep winter way where sound feels almost non-existent. He learned from his dad that snow absorbs sound. After he ate, Roscoe suddenly stood up and started barking toward the trees. It did not concern him at first. Deer were everywhere out there, and he had barked at them before. He told him to relax, and he did after a minute, sitting back down. He checked the time and decided he would stay up a bit longer by the fire before turning in. He always carried a handgun when camping in remote places, and it was holstered at his side like it always was. He felt fine at that point. About 20 minutes later, Roscoe started barking again, louder this time. Then the camper heard it too, footsteps moving through the snow somewhere out in the woods. He stood up and listened. The steps stopped, then started again. Roscoe went from barking to growling, then suddenly went silent. He stood staring straight ahead toward the trees. He felt a cold breeze pick up, whispering through the pine needles above him. That was when the camper felt uneasy. He followed his dog's gaze and saw a shape at the edge of the tree line. Someone was standing there, half hidden in the darkness, just barely lit by the fire. He called out, saying that he scared him, and telling Roscoe it was okay. The figure did not move at first. Then he stepped forward slightly enough for the camper to see that it was a man. He asked what the camper was doing out there, that deep in the woods. His tone was not friendly. The camper told him he was just getting out into nature with his dog. He did not respond right away. He just stood there watching. The camper could feel the situation turning wrong. He told him calmly that he was armed. The man slightly laughed and said something about being threatened and asked where his hospitality was. Then he turned and walked back into the darkness, his footsteps fading into the woods. The camper stood there for a long time after that, staring at the trees. Roscoe stayed close to him. He did not like any of it, but eventually he told himself the man was gone. He put out the fire carefully, throwing snow on it and stirring the ashes until there was nothing left that could glow. He did not want light drawing attention. He crawled into his tent and sealed it up. Inside, he did everything he could to stay warm. He laid his sleeping pad down to keep the cold ground from draining heat from his body. He stayed fully dressed, pulled on a knit hat, and cinched his sleeping bag tight around his shoulders. He kept a hand warmer near his core and another near his feet. Roscoe curled up next to him, his body heat helping more than anything. He lay there listening to the woods, or rather the silence, After a while, Roscoe started growling again. Then the camper heard what he was growling at. Footsteps in the snow. They stopped and Roscoe quieted, but his ears were still perked up. Then the footsteps started again, closer this time and slower than before. They came right up to the tent and stopped. Roscoe began howling loudly. The camper whispered for him to stop, terrified of drawing attention. When he did stop, he went back to growling. Whoever it was just stood outside the tent. He could hear subtle movement like the shift of weight in the snow. He had his gun in his hand now, but he did not want to make threats. He did not want to be forced to follow through with the threats. He had never actually shot anyone, and he did not think he had it in him to kill someone, even in self-defense. Finally, he could not take it anymore. He cocked the gun and said clearly that whoever was there needed to leave now. There was silence for a few seconds. Then he heard footsteps again, moving away from the tent, slowly at first, then faster before disappearing into the woods. He did not unzip the tent to look out. He stayed frozen for hours. Roscoe stayed alert the entire time, which was the only reason he even felt remotely comfortable eventually nodding off. He barely slept, drifting off only in short bursts. When the sky finally began to lighten, he packed up as fast as he could at the crack of dawn. They hiked back to the truck and drove away. He never went back to that part of the woods again, and he never will. Creeps like that guy really make life scary sometimes, and remind you that you can never really let your guard down. July 4th weekend in 2025. A young man drove from Melbourne, Florida to Charleston, South Carolina, to visit a good friend named Mark he had not seen in years. Mark was there on an internship for his law program and staying in a house in the city. The friend was visiting for the weekend and spending the night downstairs on a couch by some windows. After a smooth drive, he arrived in Charleston and they played some pickleball before nightfall. When the night settled in, he went back downstairs to the couch by the windows that faced another apartment building and a small labyrinth of alleyways with an abandoned house across the street. The historic charm of Charleston was famous, and the two had been looking forward to this reunion for months. The next day, after playing more pickleball in the morning and hanging out, they went to the main Charleston market. They walked through it and eventually came out near the docks by the water. That is when they saw him. A man in a wedding suit was shambling down the road near the water. He wore a crisp bow tie and clean dress shoes, and his suit was freshly pressed. He had curly hair and a tan complexion. The market behind them was loud and busy, yet this man moved alone across the street with a slow, detached movement. He did not notice them and seemed to be in his own world. If they crossed the street, they would have walked straight into him. Instinctively, the friend wanted to avoid him. He grabbed Mark by the arm and told him they were not crossing. They walked to the right, deeper into the city, and picked up their pace. He was moving slowly, so they created distance easily. He told Mark the guy did not look homeless. His clothes were too clean, too crisp. Something about him felt wrong. Mark agreed. They kept walking for a while. A few streets later on, another busy stretch of Charleston, they looked toward a shop and saw him again. That same man with the same shambling movement. He was far down the street, diagonal to them, moving at the same slow pace. Somehow he caught up to them, even though there was no clear way he could have reached that spot without them seeing him. He pointed him out to Mark. It made no sense. They pushed it aside and kept exploring Charleston. The next day was July 4th, and that night they watched the fireworks on an island about 20 minutes from the city. By then, they had mostly forgotten about the man in the suit. They assumed he was just some strange person wandering around, but something about him set off alarm bells. It felt out of place, wrong. That night, they decided to go on a ghost tour, which they had already planned before the trip. It was his last night in Charleston on July 5th, and the city was packed. It was a busy Saturday night with crowds everywhere, and lights pouring from restaurants. They finished the ghost tour, and walked through the main area of the city filled with restaurants and nightlife. The street was crowded, and a particular wave of people was moving toward them, and quite fast. As this group approached, both Mark and the friend noticed something at the exact same moment. It was him, the same man in the same wedding suit with the same bow tie, shambling in the middle of the crowd, as if he had been placed there. He stood out instantly. His movement was completely different from everyone else. He did not blend in. No one around him noticed him. Two people were walking right beside him, and he brushed between them without either of them reacting. He kept the same slow, unsettling pace, while the entire crowd moved normally around him. He glanced at them for a brief second, and then continued forward. It was as if he was tied to the movement of the crowd without truly being part of it. Mark and the friend looked at each other in shock. It made no sense. He did not belong there, and something in both of them recognized that immediately. They watched him move down the street until the crowd thinned out. When it did, they saw him clearly, still shambling, still moving at that same unnatural pace, disappearing into a darker side street until he turned a corner. They were quiet, not panicking, but deeply unsettled. The same man in the same suit, appearing multiple times in different parts of the city, always shambling, always out of place. Both of them knew something was wrong. It was as if their minds could not fully process what their eyes were seeing. Later that night, they returned to the house. Mark went upstairs to his room, and the friend went downstairs to sleep. He shut the blinds and tried to settle in. At some point in the middle of the night, he woke up to a tap on the window. He froze. After a few moments, he forced himself to look. He lifted the blind slightly and looked down the alley. At the far end, he saw the back of a man turning the corner. It was him again. He moved out of sight, but right before he disappeared, he looked back toward the window. He told Mark the next morning. He explained what he saw, and even Mark admitted that the entire experience was disturbing. Mark does not believe in anything paranormal, and he is extremely logical and grounded, but even he was shaken. They will never forget that weekend. The man in the suit felt real and unreal at the same time. Something about all that was off. He drove home to Florida on July 6th, and the image of him turning that corner has stayed with him ever since. A young man never thought he would be the kind of person who double-checks door locks or memorizes the sounds of his own floorboards, but that changed after 1 week last winter. He lives alone in a small house he bought a few years ago, and his routine has been boring and predictable. He works from home, orders groceries, goes to the gym late at night, and does not talk to his neighbors much at all. His home was his peaceful retreat, a place where he always felt completely secure behind closed doors. That highly predictable and isolated routine is the exact reason why it took him much longer than it should have to realize that something was terribly wrong in his home. It started with a noise he heard around 2:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. He was half asleep on the couch with the television still on low, when he heard what sounded like a soft thump near the back of the house. It was not loud enough to scare him, and his first thought was that something had fallen in the kitchen, or maybe the house had shifted. We all hear sounds like that in the house or apartment once in a while. He immediately muted the television so he could listen. Nothing else happened. He checked the back door, made absolutely sure it was locked, and went to bed. The next morning, he noticed the back door felt different when he opened it. The deadbolt still worked, but the handle felt loose, like it had been twisted too hard. He made a mental note to fix it later. That night, he went to the gym around 11 in the evening like he usually does. He likes an empty gym. He got back around midnight to 12:30. As he pulled into his driveway, he noticed his porch light was off, yet he always leaves it on. He stood there in his car for a few seconds, trying to remember if he had turned it off earlier. Then he convinced himself he probably did. Inside, everything looked normal. He walked through every room just doing an innocent little analysis before going to bed, something he had never done before. On Thursday morning, he woke up to his alarm and noticed his phone was at 12% battery. He always charges it overnight, and he clearly remembered plugging it in. The cable was still connected to his phone, but the charger was no longer connected to the outlet. Weird. He told himself he must have knocked it loose in his sleep. But that explanation did not really make sense, because his phone was still on the nightstand, not in bed with him. At that moment, his only explanation was he picked up his phone in the middle of the night, accidentally yanked it off the outlet without realizing, and set it back down. He started paying closer attention after that. That night, he stayed up later than usual, sitting in the dark with the television off, just listening. Around 3 in the morning, he heard slow thumps coming from the back of the house. He wondered if they were footsteps, but told himself it could not be. He held his breath, but the thumps seemingly stopped. After a while, he convinced himself the thumps came from outside. He lives in the suburbs, so there are of course other people around, even at night. He stared at the shadows, praying his mind was just playing tricks. The next day, he found muddy shoe prints on the floor near the back door. The thing is, though, the footprints were not clear. He could not distinctly make out patterns of the bottoms of the shoes, which made it look like someone tried to wipe them off before walking around. His stomach literally skipped a beat. He stood there staring at them, trying to understand how they got there. He had not had anyone over. He had not gone outside in muddy shoes. He checked the back door again, and this time he noticed faint scratch marks around the lock, like someone had used something thin to pry at it. He called the locksmith and told him he thought his lock was failing. He did not say anything about the footprints. The locksmith replaced the lock that afternoon and told him everything should be fine. That night, he pushed a chair under the back door handle and slept with his bedroom door locked, something he never did before then. He woke up just before 4 in the morning to the sound of something tapping lightly on his bedroom door. It was not a knock. It sounded like someone testing the door with their fingertips. He stayed completely still, staring at the door, his eyes burning because he refused to blink. The tapping stopped after a minute, and then he heard soft footsteps moving away. He did not sleep after that. In the morning, the chair was still under the back door, but the back door itself was unlocked. The new lock was not damaged, it had just been turned, and that is when reality truly set in. He was not just imagining these things, like he thought he was because he was tired. Someone had been inside his house while he was asleep, and knew how to unlock the door from the inside. He called the police and tried to explain without sounding insane. They checked the house, looked around the yard, and told him there was no sign of forced entry. They suggested he might have unlocked the door himself without remembering. He knew that was not true, but there was nothing they could do either way. That night, he stayed awake with all the lights on and a kitchen knife on the table in front of him. Around 2 in the morning, he heard something from down in the basement. The basement door, which was just outside of the kitchen, was cracked open. He felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. He stared down the hallway to the cracked open basement door. He walked over to it, peeked down through just what the crack in the door would allow him to see, and he knew it was not his imagination. He saw at the bottom of the stairs the outline of someone standing there. He did not know if they were looking up or not. When he realized what he was looking at, he slammed the door shut, locked it, and sprinted out to his car. He sat in his car as he once again called 911. After police showed up a second time, they entered while he waited in one of their cars. They brought him out of the house in handcuffs a few minutes later. The intruder was barefoot and wearing dark clothes that looked like they had been slept in. He did not look at the homeowner once. He just did not seem to notice him in the back of the car. They put him in the back of the other car and shut the door. The homeowner stayed outside while more officers went back in. He was actually shaking even as he talked to the officers, stuttering in shock. It took longer than he expected for them to finish the rest of their search. When one of the officers finally came out, he asked how long the homeowner had lived there. He told him a few years. The officer nodded and wrote something down. He asked what time he usually went to the gym and which nights. The homeowner told him. The officer looked back at the house and told him they found food wrappers and bottled water behind the furnace in the basement, along with a phone charger plugged into an outlet down there. He said it looked like someone had been sleeping on the concrete using old insulation as padding. The man had not spoken a word to the officers. The main officer explained the likely charges the man would be facing, but that ultimately it would be up to the district attorney. Eventually, they told the homeowner he could go back inside. It was days later that he was going through his camera roll to send his friend something when he found a very disturbing picture. At first, he had to process how a picture